And this is where Ramlal Chole Bhature pledge a part of their holding. Please note a word pledge. A part of their holding in an escrow account, which is technically known as earmarked also. I think earmarked is the right word, not the pledge. They earmarked their whatever, say 20% or whatever of that. And that they will put in an escrow account to make sure that they won't be doing this funding again. And based upon that, as a guarantee, they are raising the bond. Now here, the interest rate, which earlier used to be 10% or something, it will come down drastically to 7% and sometimes less than 7%. But there are substantial legal and financial issues as far as this deal is concerned. In fact, I would say that substantial legal issues than financial issues. Number one legal issue is that suppose you are holding, originally you investing 500 crores in XYZ company. Today, the valuation of this 500 crores ends up become 1500 crores, which means 3 times. And you're expecting it will go to 6 times, which means 3000 crores, and then you would wind up and quit. Okay. But the point here is when you do equity financing via bond route, then legally you are supposed to pledge the whole 1500 crores at this point of time, which hypothetically we assume is 2% of that XYZ company in the escrow account. You may be using 0.5% of the 2%, which is 1/4. But having said that, the total funding which you are taking is irrespective of that fact. You are supposed to pledge earmarked complete 2% in the escrow account. The legal logic behind that is that it is stopping Ramlal Chole Bhature not to sell the whole at a given point of time, because the person who is lending, who is investing in a bond, he always have an apprehension what would Ramlal Chole Bhature, without letting him know, sell the entire holding of the equities in this company, then he left with no guarantee. Point number one. Henceforth, legally speaking, here comes the first agreement which you're supposed to have. And when I'm using a word agreement, then I means immaculate agreement, and that is called escrow agreement. In an escrow agreement, you are supposed to be perfect, and you are supposed to be clear that what are the rights and responsibilities of Ramlal Chole Bhature, who are issuing the bond, and what would be the rights and responsibilities of the investment bank who is helping to raise the money. These rights and responsibilities should be clearly mentioned without having anything which can comes as a doubt before both the parties. And it would always be better if both that relevant investment bank and Ramlal Chole Bhature would have an arbitration agreement in place. That God forbid, if there is a dispute to happen between both the parties, then what would be the venue of the arbitration, how the appointment of the arbitration to happen, which is covered under Indian Arbitration Act, and what would be the seat of the arbitration, and how we would be handling the arbitration. What would be the roles and responsibilities of Ramlal Chole Bhature in that arbitration and that XYZ investment bank. This is first hurdle. Second, and the biggest hurdle, since you are pledging your equity, I agree you are pledging complete 2%, although you need 1/4 of that, which is 0.5%. But still, there is an issue which is called cash collateral agreement. In our parlance, it is called CCA. Cash collateral agreement means, God forbid, what would if whatever company you invested would end as a bankrupt company, or there is a strike in that company, the person who is giving the raw material stopped giving the raw material, or some act of God, or maybe any geopolitical war or any conflicts, anything can happen. Or maybe the company enters into insolvency code, maybe into the Securitization Act. We never know this about. Henceforth, the cash collateral agreement should be in place, which means that if due to the eventualities, means tick, 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 these eventualities. Ladies and gentlemen, here comes the role of the law. The person who is drafting this agreement, this person should be very, very knowledgeable person, and he should mention each and everything about that agreement. What would if you enter in the Securitization Act, Section 13? What would if you enter Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, Section 7, Section 8, Section 9, or Section 10? What would if you end up in both? What would if any secured creditor take the possession of your property, which means the relevant stocks? What would if you end up if you're not getting the raw material and due to this your productivity falls? What would if there is some geopolitical issue at your top client? What would this, that, and XYZ? Because due to any of these reasons, the valuation of the share price, which are pledged before that relevant investment bank, that valuation fall. Sudden fall should be the right word. And because of that, investment bank is left with nothing but an issue called variation margin. And that variation margin means that when you pledged that the valuation was 1500 crores, but God forbid, due to whatever reasons, today it is not 1500 crores, it is merely 400 crores. And you borrowed 1000 crores against that. Henceforth, it's a serious conflict of interest. You are supposed to enhance your security, and that too via cash. There are many people who believe that cash collateral agreement includes the securities also, but I tend to differ because I believe that if cash collateral agreement includes securities, then in this eventuality it's an hybrid. The last and very important legal issue in equity financing via a bond, and that is called indenture. I spoke about indenture many times, and today, immense blessings of God that I would be reading a definition of indenture for you. Indenture sets out the terms and conditions of the issued bond, including the guarantee from the guarantor. In addition, it sets out certain events of default that may lead to the bond becoming immediate due and payable. The indenture also set out certain termination events, though not the events of default. I will come to the termination events later. which led could lead to bond becoming due and payable. Actually, they are nothing but the embedded derivatives, which means that it all depends upon the issuer. Like in the case of Apple, they always wish to have a call derivative. They wish to buy back early. They wish to have their balance sheet free from any kind of debt. While there are some put also, which means that the investor is holding a right to sell through and get his cash. So I further repeat, and that's really an interesting point, that bond become due and payable. The parties to the indenture were the issuer, of course, the issuer, because the issuer who is issuing that, in our case, we assume a hypothetical company, Ramlal Cholimture. The guarantor is generally the same company, but sometimes it is different company also, and that is called SPE, which is called Special Purpose Entity, and SPV, Special Purpose Vehicle. Technically, people believe that special purpose entity and special purpose vehicle both are same. Sorry, they are not same. They differ, and sometimes the country to country basis there are technical differences and the legal differences in that. Some countries are very good as far as the SPV creation is concerned. Some countries are not very conducive in SPV creation. So it's matter from country to country. The trustee is a party who holds the trust. Actually, honestly speaking, that trustee is a very it's a word which requires a very healthy debate, because what are you calling a trust? Because that trust is a private trust, maybe as a private trust or maybe a public trust. And that again depends on the trust act of that relevant country, and that again depends which fund vehicle is entering into the picture. So suppose an alternate investment fund is entering into a picture. In this eventuality, the scenario of equity financing via a bond route would completely change. Because here, the roles and responsibilities of a trust would be far bigger versus the role and responsibility I mentioned. This is one of the reasons I clearly spell out in the early part of the video that equity financing agreement, EFAs, is like beyond imagination. It is a clientele product, which means that it is up to the client who will decide, I want that kind of product. But like I said, the investment banker needs to take the final call, because it is the moral responsibility of the investment banker to issue this product in the market in the form of book building, reverse book building, and various other procedures. Investment banker needs to take up a call whether it would be feasible for him to have this in place, or it won't be feasible for him to have this in place. Henceforth, ladies and gentlemen, investment banker is really a key person or the final decision maker in this scenario. But yes, if the companies are cash-rich companies, very qualitative balance sheet companies like Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, very strong balance sheet, having a very strong business model, in this eventualities, the say is of the companies, because finding such good high quality customers is always a tough job for investment bankers. Also huge competition even in that industry. The trustee and the calculation agent. Actually, I strongly believe that we should not use the word calculation agent, because calculation agent is like, it is a role which is played by the custodian. So I strongly believe that it is the custodian who is playing that role. So having a separate calculation agent in that picture is something, it's not a cost-effective solution, but some people have this when the amount is very big. Anyways, that is their personal call. The very important thing, ladies and gentlemen, we need to see is that investment banking is a very big process. And more importantly, the investment banker works country to country. They works in India, Singapore, United States, Germany, Russia, France, Latin America, Dubai, Hong Kong, Philippines, everywhere. And the laws of all countries are different. Some countries permit few things, some do not permit few things, some permit little relaxation, some do not permit, some offer good relaxation. Sometimes the tax code is conducive, sometimes the tax code is not conducive, so it's all matters. Henceforth, ladies and gentlemen, we need to be very careful as far as the legal framework of your investment banking deals is concerned, and especially when you are raising a huge amount of money. I found out that in few deals, in few merger and acquisitions, you know, people people even raised a huge quantum of money. The legal agreement is really very tough. Henceforth, it is utmost important for the company to have a perfect escrow agreement in place. Remember, sometimes the escrow agents belongs to the country. Sometimes you need to borrow their services outside. So, example, sitting in India, you will take in Singapore, or sitting in Singapore, you take the services in India, or vice versa. And sometimes the more important thing is that you would be, the cash collateral agreement. And last but not the least, the very important concept is the indenture. Ladies and gentlemen, as the time would progress, we would have more interesting videos about our LIB desk. LIB means, like we explained, legal investment banking desk. But having said that, investment banking is amongst the most complicated financial function I ever been to. Because to conclude, this function is a clientele-based product function. Every client holding a certain requirement. And you need to see whether as an investment bank, it is feasible or not in a legal framework.